The year 870, the heathen army that had landed on English shores almost 6 years ago had now consolidated enough of a force to attack Wessex, the strongest kingdom of England. Their biggest push for supremacy over all of England. They established a camp at Reading, where they were defended in the north by the river Thames, and in the back and to the east by the river Kennet. So naturally, they built a rampart to the west, the only direction they could be attacked from, since attacking over a river would more or less be suicide for the enemies. So feeling secure in their fortified position, they sent out a raiding party to the village of Engelsfield for food and other provisions they could get their hands on. But on their way there, they were ambushed by the elderman Aethelwulf, who from the land he governed had mobilized an army of 1,400 men, the so-called Fyrd. These men were little more than farmers fighting with sickles and hammers. But with the Vikings sending out such a small raiding party, the Fyrd had numbers. And with the leadership of Aethelwulf, they inflicted the first major defeat on the Vikings. The raid group was defeated and forced back to Reading. 3 days later, the king Aethelred and his brother Alfred arrived with the West Saxon army. Hearing of the great victory, he was so encouraged that he decided to drive the Vikings out completely. And so, he led his army against the Vikings at their Reading encampment. The Saxons attacked the Vikings from the west, attempting to break straight through the rampart and slaughter them. But attempting to push through a rampart is incredibly hard, as they are attacked from above and fighting a shield wall to shield wall in the gateway, where numbers don't matter, since you can only fit so many men in the gateway. Both sides lost many men, but the Saxons suffered the most of it, and upon Aethelwulf's death, the man that had carried them to victory in Engelsfield, morale broke, and the Saxons were forced into a retreat. The Vikings pursued them, but the Saxons marched into some marshlands, and the Vikings lost track of them. But the Vikings, feeling they now had to push their advantage, regrouped and gave chase to the Saxons. The Vikings caught up to the Saxons at the field of Ashton. The Saxon army was reorganizing their army on King's Stand Hill, which got its name after this battle. It was cold and wet, and the fields and hills were muddy. But with their current army, the Saxons stood no chance of beating the Vikings. So Alfred, the brother of the king, knew he had to act or they would be massacred. So Alfred blew in the blowing stone, as it is known, which is a really interesting phenomenon. It's a big boulder which has naturally formed special pathways, which makes it so that when you blow in it, it amplifies the sound, basically acting like a big stone trumpet. And with this booming sound, Alfred summoned all the men of the countryside to his army, growing his numbers significantly. Ethelred and Alfred now split their army in 2 divisions. The newly arrived Viking army did the same. The 2 Viking divisions were commanded by the 2 Viking kings, Halfdan and Berseg. The armies taunted each other, but Ethelred, the Saxon king, made the stupidest decision of his rule. He would have prayer before battle, and seeing the commander gone, Halfdan and Berseg moved in and took the high ground. During all of this, Alfred sent as many messages as possible for the king to return, but he refused. Seeing the Vikings ready for their attack, Alfred had to make a decision right now. Hope to God that his dumb brother would come back in time, or lead the attack without him. Realizing that the Vikings had taken the high ground, Alfred decided to attack, since if the Vikings got to charge them from the high ground, they would no doubt be crushed. So Alfred charged before the Vikings could, and led his column against the Vikings, and seeing this, the other half of the army charged as well. What followed was a bloody battle that left many hundreds of bodies dead on the plains. But the Vikings were defeated, and Berseg died in battle. Halfdan was the only Viking commander to make it out of the fight alive. After this battle, the Vikings regrouped and once more pushed into Wessex. And once more the armies clashed at Old Basing, which is in today's Hampshire. This time the Vikings routed the Saxons, but both armies suffered large casualties. Both the Saxon and Viking armies were now exhausted, having lost many men and fought 4 battles the last month. So 2 months passed without any incursion by the Vikings. But the 22nd March of 871, the Vikings attack, And once more Halfdan meets the two royal brothers Aethelred and Alfred on the field of battle.